Everybody have a pretty good Christmas, right? Good. You're aware that a new year happened, right? I hope. You're like, it did. It's like, it did. If you're still writing checks, it's no fun anymore like a new year, because like nobody writes checks anymore and does the stuff where you screw up all the time. But, it's 2020. That's exciting. But I want to get into this ninth step tonight. Alex is working on the pre-step to this sort of, and it goes like this. Made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so. It's a big except when to do so would injure them or others. And if you get into the way media in general talks about recovery, this is about the way media talks about recovery. You go somewhere and you get a little bit of detox, and then when you get done with detox and you sort of get like it's such a big deal, right? When you get the alcohol or the drugs or whatever out of your system, well, then you progress on and you go to a couple meetings, and then a couple weeks later, you make up to all your friends and tell them how sorry you are for what a screw-up you've been, and then everybody's happy, and it's like at the end of a Hallmark movie, and all your relationships are fine, and everyone gets it, and they're all so thankful that you're all fixed up, and then everyone's good, right? And that's how we do it in the media. But man, that's 100 million miles away from what we're going to be talking about tonight for a bunch of different reasons. But to get into what we're doing tonight, I want to tell you a story. I don't read a lot in general, but I mean, unless it's sports, I do. But I mean, there is a guy that writes books, and his name is C.S. Lewis. Some of you are probably really into this guy, right? Anybody a big C.S. Lewis fan? Okay, if you are, I'm about to tell a story, and if I tell it wrong, shut up. I don't want to see your face and go, well, that's not really how it goes. I don't care. I'm doing my best, all right? So that's just how we're going to do it. But the story goes, there is a guy, a little kid, a little boy. And this little boy is taken over by like this evil force. And this evil force turns this little boy into a dragon. I put this picture up of a dragon. That's a illustration of this dragon. And so this little boy doesn't want to be this dragon. Everybody's afraid of him, and he's just uncomfortable in his skin, and he doesn't want to be this dragon. And there is a lion in this story, Aslan, I believe is his name, right? Aslan, am I right so far? Connor, is that right? It's good, man, thank you. You'll tell me if I'm wrong. I'm looking away from you. I don't care. But anyway, there's this guy, Aslan, who's a lion. And the little boy asks Aslan if he would help him to not be a lion, right? And that's what he does. And so Aslan says to him, in order for you to not be a lion, I'm going to have to take my claw, and I'm going to have to dig into you, and I'm going to have to take your scales off, pretty much one by one. And it's going to hurt. And you go into the story, and the little boy talks about how much pain it caused him when for the first time Aslan the lion digs into him and takes that first scale off. And and that goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's a long, hard, difficult process for this boy to get back to his real skin, and like the part of the story that's so much like us, I think, is we all learn somewhere along the way, everybody does, how to become very good at being defensive. And if recovery doesn't give you the gift of anything else, it at least gives you the opportunity to have the gift of learning how to be free of being defensive and learning how to simply be with people and tell them the truth. It's like, how it is at a gathering, right? And you have several friends of yours there, and somebody for some reason makes somebody mad. And so somebody's going to go, well, I mean, like when I said that, I mean, like, did I make you mad? And you're going to go, most people are going to go, well, I mean, no, not really. Like, this is like sort of marriage 101. You learn how to deflect and deny, the D and D's, right? And you learn how to go, no, I mean, you really didn't make me mad. You're secretly very, very pissed, but you're like, well, no, you really didn't make me mad. So that kind of goes on for a while, right? Nobody's gaining in that. Nobody's gaining in the keeping of those scales. And so one of the things that happens when the scales comes off in this story is that defense mechanic isn't there. We end up like the little boy eventually in the story. You know, the lion Aslan takes all of those scales off of him and he's in this new skin. And he talks about how the little boy, it's almost like a baptism story in some ways, but the little boy talks about how he jumps into this lake and he goes, when I first jumped into the lake in my new skin, it really smarted. It really hurt, you know, like for a minute when I jumped into this cold water, but he goes, only for a little bit. And then he talks about in the story how unbelievably refreshing being in this new skin is. You know, and so it's kind of like in recovery, we're going to do some stuff, I think, in a few weeks on relationships. And it's kind of like one of the gifts of recovery is when somebody hurts you, whether you're married to them or they're a friend of yours or somebody at work or whatever it is, when someone hurts you and they go, oh, did I hurt your feelings? You can go, my feelings were hurt. You can even learn to go, it's not that you hurt my feelings, it's that my feelings got hurt. That's a true statement, right? There isn't, like, that's just the truth. Like, I sometimes think that is so refreshing. I remember my first real job as a pastor was in Houston, Texas. And I don't know if anybody here is a Texan, but anybody here grew up in Texas? Yeah? This is going to make sense to you, right? In Texas, tell me if I'm wrong. In Texas, native Texans just tell you the deal. Am I right? They don't like do what we do here in the Southeast, right? They just sort of go, this is the deal. You are dead wrong, or I completely disagree with you, or I agree with you, or this is how we're going to do it. Am I right? That's how they do it. So when I was at a church there, I got used to going to church meetings where people just said the deal. Like they would be like, I disagree with you. That's not how I think we should do it, and here's why. Then I moved from Houston to Charlotte, North Carolina. And what did I learn there? I learned there that the church meeting that went on in the building, it wasn't like the real meeting. It was like the faux meeting. The real meeting took place after the meeting out in the parking lot when everyone told each other what they really thought. You know, it's kind of like how we get to the bless your heart thing, right? And so like I started when the first time I started realizing this, I prayed this prayer one night at the beginning of a church council meeting. I'm like, thank you so much, God, for being here with us at the Liars Club. And I just really appreciate you being here with us at the Liars Club tonight. And, you know, it's good to know that you're with us. And this guy goes, I got a little put out when you prayed, you know, that our church council meeting was like the Liars Club. And I'm like, well, you were supposed to get pissed off over that. I mean, that was the point, man. Thank you. But I mean, I was trying to do that. I was trying to piss you off. That's what I was trying to do. But like the point of it is, man, we're not telling each other the truth. He goes, well, we're doing the best we can. I'm like, no, we're not. That's like having the scales on, right? Isn't that what that is? And this step is going to challenge every last scale that you have on you, because here it is, true or false. We're going to get to this later, but true or false. Making amends is exactly the same thing as apologizing to somebody. True or false? False, because the thing about it is, and we'll see here in a minute, the thing about it is, making amends involves you having to get every single one of those scales off of you. And you know, the lion in that story is obviously got a connection to Jesus, and that's going to be Jesus doing that work. And that's like, are you entirely willing to have that happen? What would it take for you to be satisfied tonight? We've said all along in this whole series that satisfaction means being fully known, fully loved, and fully restored by God. And I'm going to add to that tonight. Satisfaction means allowing God to peel every last scale off of me. It means allowing God to peel every last scale off of me. And that's what we're going to get into tonight. Like one of the things I was talking about earlier with the media is what I would call step jumping. So step jumping in recovery is like this. I do step one. I read it anyway. I'm aware of what step one is. Let's just say that. I don't work it, but I'm aware of it. And so once I get to step one and I go, yeah, life's pretty out of control. That's a diagnostic. That's really not a thing of the heart right there for most of us first go around. It's just like, life's for crap, man. Things are not going well. So we can say that. We can get that out of us because everybody else around us is believing it, right? So, that's not, at the face of it, that's not that big a deal. It really is a very big deal when you start working it, but to say it, not that big a deal. You might even go with step two. Things are a little bit insane. And I need some help to get out of what I'm into right now. But then we're going to jump all the way to these fix-it steps. Like, well, I don't want people to be mad at me, so, my relationships are bad, so, I'll just try to go make amends and tell people I'm sorry and it'll all be okay. That's step jumping. Or the other thing we're going to see a lot is you get into step, you sort of show up in recovery, you do step one, and then what do you want to do? You want to tell everybody else that you possibly know how they need to get some help. I see it all the time. Like, you go right from step one, am I right? Right from step one all the way to freaking step 12. You really need some help, man. Here it was 10 days ago. I was just like you. It's like, I was just like you. But I've seen the light, I'm not like you now, but I was just like you. And you really ought to get some help. Step jumping. For this step to really have legitimacy to it, here's kind of the deal. This is what you would need. And the farther we get into these later steps, the more I got to emphasize this. We're talking about them as if you could do them right now. If you're new to this, not true. What you would need is at least 8 to 12 months of recovery. That means that you're going to meetings regularly for 8 to 12 months. That means that you're working with a sponsor regularly for 8 to 12 months. That means you're working on the steps regularly for several months. That's what that means. When I talk about going to meetings, I'm talking about like more than one meeting a week, more than one meeting a month, more than one meeting a quarter. I'm talking about going to meetings like they're a regular part of your life, kind of like drinking water or having lunch or whatever. They're a regular part of your life. They're a regular part of your rhythm. And you've been doing that work for 8 to 12 months. And then this step is going to maybe start to make some sense. Because here's what I know. Making amends is going to affect you a lot more than you think, because here's the part of this step that's so different is if it was just an apology, let's say, this is what I know about myself. Let's say that I believe I'm headstrong. Let's say that I believe that I'm impatient. Let's say that I believe that I'm more often right than I'm not right. That's headstrong, I guess. Let's say that I'm definitely not very flexible. And let's say that all that is what I know about myself. Now, if I have in some way wronged you, and I simply come to you and go, man, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry that I made you mad. What I'm doing is I'm apologizing to you, right? But as long as you accept my apology, all the stuff I just named, my inflexibility, my being judgmental or whatever, my believing that I'm normally right, my sense of superiority about my point of view, my sense of being like much more in command of life than most people are, all of that that's packaged together, all of that that's sort of like I know best about what's best for me, but not only what's best for me, but what's best for most other people. I really think I kind of know best. All of that, none of that about me has to change. And so in the story, that would mean that I could remain the dragon, and I could just be a dragon that says, well, I'm sorry. But I still look like a dragon, have scales like a dragon. I haven't gone through any pain at all to go through any kind of transformation from being a dragon to being back to who God made me in the case of that story. I haven't gone through any kind of transformation like that. I just told you I'm sorry. And then we're square, right? But the thing about making amends is not only is there potential for the relationship to change, which it may or it may not, right? It may or it may not. But there is tremendous potential that I, because of my desire to make an amends, am definitely going to experience change and growth in my life. Are you following me? And so it's sort of like another piece of that is, when do you know that you're ready to make amends to somebody? Besides the 8 to 12 months of meetings, sponsors, and working steps. Here's, I think, one way that you know. Do you believe that the person you're about to go make amends with, do you believe that whatever happened between you and them, that God has already forgiven you for that? Like, do you believe that God has already forgiven you for what you're about to make amends for? Do you understand me? And so then things become very different, because if I believe that God has already forgiven me for what I'm about to ask you to forgive me for, and for me to not make, there's more to it than just this, but for me to make an amends to you, because amends means more than just seeking your forgiveness. But if you believe that God has already forgiven you for whatever it is that's going to happen between you and this person, it's going to completely change the way you make amends, isn't it? Because now I already have that understanding of where God is with me, and now what I'm going to do with you is not going to be driven by the potential outcome of what the other person's going to do. Meaning, most of us are going to go, well, did you make amends to Susie? I did. Oh, is everything good with the two of you now? It's not. Well, why isn't it? Because she didn't accept my amends. But what I know already is that God has accepted my amends. How do I know that God has accepted my amends? Because I have allowed God, in the case of the story, I have allowed God to peel the scales off of me, and I've had God show me where I was broken. I've had God show me what about me was broken. I've had God show me what about me was prideful, not humble, and on down the line. He has shown me. One of the biggest purposes of this step is for me to get new skin. It's not just trying to make my relationships okay again. It's for me to get new skin. I'm not the woman that I was. I'm not the man that I was. We're not going to get things back to where they were, but they're going to be completely different. Like, I don't know anybody, I have yet to meet anybody that would say that when they as a couple have gone through recovery and their marriage is intact, but they've gone through recovery. Maybe they were separated a while, whatever, I don't know. But they've gone through recovery, and you go, their marriage is intact. That would say to you, when you went through recovery as a couple, and when one or both of you made amends, is it true that your marriage went back to where your marriage was prior to the compulsion? Like, every single person I have ever known that is still married after dealing with an act of compulsion would say to me, our marriage is entirely different than it was prior to my addiction or my compulsion and my recovery. Amen? And they will tell you that they had to fight for that marriage. They will tell you that they are still sometimes experiencing significant ups and downs, because what happens is spouse number one, who's not the addict or the alcoholic or the compulsive, is now doing a first-class job as a codependent, and the spouse that is in an active compulsion is doing a first-class job of that, and both of those people have to learn an entirely different way to live with each other. Amen? An entirely different way to live with each other. And making amends is about new skin. It has as much impact on the amends maker as the person you are making amends with. And I do believe that it's an unsafe activity until you understand fully what God has already done with you, regardless of the outcome of what this person's going to do. Because like the making direct amends, it has more to it than just making an apology. It's got to do with, have I tried to right the wrong? That's a direct amends. I've tried to right the wrong. If it's financial or whatever it is, I've tried to right the wrong. Indirect amends is, I've tried to do everything possible to take away the pain that I have caused in this person's life. That's what this is about. And along the way, a lot of me is going to go through something, amen? A lot of scales are going to fall off of me. This will affect you a lot more than you think. The success of this step is willingness of action. The success of this step is based on willingness for action. What is the difference between making an amends and an apology? It's harder. It's a lot harder. How do you do this? How do you do this step? Well, here's some pieces. Again, without some experience of recovery, you're not going to know. But here they go. Number one, get help. You're going to talk through what you're going to do to make an amends. You got to talk to somebody like a sponsor about, here's what happened with me and this person. Here's where we are. Here's where we left it. Here's what got screwed up. Here's how this thing got to the level that it's at. Here's how long it's been going on. Here's the history in this. All the stuff you would have never talked about before recovery, all the base stuff that you were on the run from before recovery, you're now willing to talk to a sponsor about all of it. Not just some of it, but all of it. What was your motive? What were you thinking when this happened? Why were you feeling this way? What were you trying to accommodate that set off this person, but really was coming from your own pain? That deep of a conversation. You get it with a sponsor. You take the time to do this. Here's a big piece. Write it down. When you are going to make amends with John, what are you going to say to John? Write it down. Live with what you wrote down for a while. Journal how what you wrote down makes you feel. Take time to go all the way through this and then share all of that with a sponsor again. Success equals the desire and the action of the amends, not the outcome. If you think that when you make an amends, the goal is really justice, that's a really problematic goal. Amen? That's a problematic goal if you believe that the acceptable outcome has to be justice. You know what the acceptable outcome has to be? Number one, honesty. Number two, love. Number one, honesty. Number two, love. I don't know what somebody else is going to say to you. I can't predict how people are going to react to an experience that you have, especially people that don't have any recovery. How do I evaluate this piece of this step where it says, I'm going to go make direct amends to somebody that I have harmed, except when to do so would cause harm to them or others? How do I evaluate causing harm? Well, I don't do that by myself either. I talk to my sponsor about that. Maybe I talk to a therapist about that. But I talk to somebody about the dilemma, about this person, if I think harm is going to be potentially involved. I don't just wing it, which is why 8 to 12 months of recovery is probably a necessary reality. 3 things. When you're going to work this step, be prepared. Be prepared by allowing God to go to work on you for a while. Number 2, examine the motivation. Why do you want to make this amends with this person? Number 3, examine the expectations. Examine the expectations of what you want to come out of that. If it's going to be justice, don't start the amends. If it's going to be reconciliation, don't start the amends. The purpose of the amends has got to be the work that God is going to do with you. The scales that God is going to remove piece by piece from you. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Jesus, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. Here's the piece. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Jesus. Who? This is like the ultimate freeing of the scales. Who, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Man, that's from Philippians 2. That stuff is exactly how you make an amends. It's exactly how you do it. We're going to open up this space in front of me for an altar. We're going to give you some time to pray about what we've been talking about tonight. You may be a long way from this step, and that's fine. Work the one you're on. It's fine. If you want to talk about this some more tonight, we'll have a care room right out these doors. Someone will be available tonight to talk to you about this some more. Thanks so much for being here. In Jesus' sweet name, amen.